I love that scratchy sound of like a vinyl record playing. Welcome everyone to another casual conversation with me, your friend Carl. When I take whatever I say in Spanish and put it in fresh sounding English words. Um, this is the only program that does that, as far as I know. Today, I'm doing more than just translating or reinterpreting, making a reinterpretation, because this is a little of like um, behind the curtains sort of type, behind the scenes type of thing. So I write it's not a script. I don't do scripts, but I write like a bullet point of ideas that I want to talk about it, about any topic that or subject that I'm doing. So this week's subject is Stranger Things, the hit Netflix series that just wrapped up with season 5. And as I was writing all the points that I wanted to talk about it, mm, I just went through with it. Like I followed the flow, right? So during my Spanish episode, by the end of it, I realized that I spent 99.5 of the episode thinking about structure and thinking about what I sort of rescue. No, it's not rescue. That's how I say in Spanish, but something that I like to acknowledge about Stranger Things. But suddenly I realized that I didn't talk about the series that much. At that point, my first reaction was like, wow, this in on itself is sort of like a revelation of what the series meant for me as a whole, which was like the details of it, the story of itself was never the thing that I enjoyed the most. So the mere process of doing the episode, of sort of going through your ideas, making a list, checking it twice, and thinking, okay, this is what I saved the most about this series. Has nothing to do with the plot itself. So, for my English um, experiment, for my English version, I want to rescue a little bit more of what I liked about the series and sort of make it understandable why, in the end, it was rather meaningless to me. The first step that led me to this was the fact that when season 5 began, I hardly remembered anything about the previous 4 seasons. And if you do retrospect, it's like self. When you think about something about yourself, right? Like self retrospective, like self spective, self reflection. I don't know. But when you think about your own thoughts and you sort of like reach this wall of like, okay, what did I remember about this? And if you remember feelings, you remember emotions, sensations, perhaps some moments, but the level of details was like really off. So you get season 1 and you remember a lot of it, like the kids, the adventure, the Dungeons and Dragons, the mystery, the disappearance of Will Byers and Eleven and her powers. You remember all of that because that is the shock moments, the foundational moments. But then you think about seasons 2, 3, and 4, and I wonder why couldn't I remember it, or more importantly, why didn't I care? If you go back to the main plot points of those, like the middle seasons 2, 3, and 4, you sort of start seeing the the mechanics of what now I like to know, and many people already know that this is kind of like the Netflix formula, which is a narrative sort of genre. You can probably call it a subgenre now. All of these writers and all of these creators, they are forced to do things in a rhythm that is so bizarre as far as storytelling goes. You don't have anymore middle, I mean, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Stories now are forced to be open at all times. And you can see that in Stranger Things by the inclusion of the mind flayer at the middle. Again, season 5 is way too new. I'm not going to spoil it. But you can see how the plot changed dramatically. Changed dramatically. Like who were the antagonists, like who were the bad guys, what were the motivations of them. That shit was as ethereal as any dream, you know. So again, I'm not gonna spoil season 5, but you cannot help but think, for example, was it season 4? I think season 4 where the Russians come in and the Russians know about the upside down. Then you wonder like why didn't the Russians did something more? Or then now you get the whole sort of hierarchy of the upside down, which is ultimately revealed in season 5, which I'm not going to spoil, right? But like without spoiling, I can say that the macrocosm or like the hierarchy, as I said before, of how this parallel world works is nothing you could have ever, ever guessed by season 2 or 3. It's impossible. And the thing that this shows, the malleability or like the capacity of this, not thesis, but of this idea to evolve like that, is because it was written that way. I mentioned this when I talk about comics, and I'm not a writer, even though I tried it. And I've written some short stuff that probably sucks. But you know how often writers they like to say, "Oh, I knew the ending of my story. I already knew how it was going to end." That thing is complete BS in our world of streaming services and streaming service writers. You know, it's impossible. It's impossible. And this is the concept that I sort of started developing. I started developing the idea that like a great Netflix series, which probably Stranger Things now is the quintessential, that's the word, right? Like the quintessential Netflix series on how it was made and how it developed and how it eventually became a phenomenon. And none of these aspects of Stranger Things end up making a determination on it. You know, for example, if you think about Star Wars nowadays is a phenomenon, and it's not like any element of Star Wars is the one deciding factor that created this phenomena. Even if you can say the original trilogy is what it did, the whole thing. These are like 40-year-old movies. And now you cannot trace the origin of this phenomena. But Stranger Things is only 10 years old. And you can totally see the beginning of it, the building blocks of it, and how fast it happened. I saw this video of people leaving the theater after watching the final episode of the series. Again, no spoilers, but they left the cinema, the cinema, the cinema. They left the cinema, and everybody would say these things, these phrases that you've heard a million times. Like, oh, it was nostalgic, it was emotional, it reminded me of me and my friends, it took me out of dark places, whatever. And these are all valid things. That could happen with so many things. These are not exclusive to Stranger Things. The point I'm trying to make is that no element of Stranger Things, a phenomena, sort of can make a point out of, like, can make a delimitation. That's a word, right? Can make a limit to it. And why this can't be the case? Because the series itself, the story itself, the plot itself and the characters themselves, except maybe the main starting ones, the protagonist, the main four or five of them. None of them were like truly um like built as one. You know, by now everybody knows about probably I don't want to say the most controversial one, but this is no spoiler that part of season five plays a lot of unwilled sexuality. No matter what the creators say, mm, I'm pretty sure that's not something that was in there since the beginning. You can see how they change. They change characters who live, who died, who developed like this, who did that. You can totally see it. You can totally see them moving these pieces. And here's the thing, and this is why I think Stranger Things is now, to this moment in history, the like pinnacle of Netflix series in all sense, is that it worked. You know, directly, like if I'm talking about directly about the series, as I said, plot itself was never my thing. I consume enough sci-fi to not bat an eye, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I don't bat an eye to parallel universes or you know, on that sort of thing. Monsters, like you don't bat an eye to that. And when the first season came out, like everybody was like, "Oh yeah, like the Goonies or like any or similar kid stuff from the '90s. Yeah, it's always the same. It's always the same." Even though this was said, no, it was, yeah, it was in it, right? Even though it was set on the '80s or like during the '80s, people would say, "Yeah, it's another like kids adventure and capturing the image, the fantasy of you know." But the fact is that to me, what kept me coming back to Stranger Things were parts of it that now I consider to be, as I said, quintessential Netflix elements for a series. For me, was production levels. This is what I call it in. I use the term during my Spanish episode, the anchor points, things that keep you coming back, right? Production values, first of all, it needs to look good, and Netflix knows that it needs to look good. Production values, one. Second, the tone of the series. Stranger Things, you can't say it's just for kids. You can't say it's just for adults. There are so many moments where the series shifts in tone dramatically, in violence, in topics, in subjects. You know, the fact that, and this is no spoiler because I'm not going to talk about season five, but every season someone seems to die, someone seems to appear or disappear. Of course, the Eddie, what's his name, the one that's the Human Torch now. Like he was everybody's favorite character, and they went on and killed him. Right? I think that set the tone for a series that you could watch and you would keep coming back because anything was off the table. So production value, tone, and I think this is the one thing you need to nail to have this successful continuing series that has the potential to never end. And those are the characters, the main characters. And I'm gonna be really stingy here, and I'm not even going to max, like maybe not even 11, but the four kids. And this is not a sexist thing, okay? But they were the core characters of the series. Hell, in during season one, probably 11 had like one phrase. Like her whole script for the whole season one was like a page and a half. It was the kids. It was the kid they wrote perfectly evolving and not evolving at the same time characters, having childish adventures, but never completely being forced. to grow up. And that's important because many of these stories of teenagers and kids, what is the main plot device they get or that the people use? That they are forced to grow up. Something happens that changed them dramatically. Well, something does happen in Stranger Things season one. But do they change dramatically? No, they just keep adventuring and like riding the same wave. It's not until like now season five where they finally do like a halfway decent kind of like character arcs for them. And I gotta say, like you gotta highlight this and make a strong point on how hard this is. It is really hard. And whenever you talk with people that are in my same position, like people that really enjoy the series, but they like you weren't crazy for it. We were like, oh, you would end, and then you wait a couple of years for the next one. Okay, you would forget some details because like who cares, right? You weren't that passionate about it. If you're not one of those, you gotta accept that you come back for that. Who like at least me personally, I've never heard someone say like, oh, I really want to know what's the mystery behind the upside down. You know, because that's impossible. That's impossible. How can you be committed to a story that is just basically like soft clay? You know, and you think about today's form of narratives, and I keep thinking about this concept. Besides what I said, the concept of anchor points for a series like that is the concept of earning your choice to tell your story. This might sound like quite harsh, and I don't want this to have a negative connotation, but rather a positive one. You know, like now, not every series has the power like of Stranger Things to end under its own volition. And you can say like, okay, but like this is not ending. They're doing comic books and like books and spin-offs. It's a franchise now. Yeah, of course. Well, that's how things work nowadays. But the main story of Stranger Things, which, as I said again, anchor point, the kids, those four kids that you can expand to at least four or five if you add Max and 11. It was their story, and season five is all about rounding up their story. You know, that also gives validity to this anchor point theory. As long as you give these four or five characters a rest, like who cares what happened with the rest? Even if they were like great characters, like Robin or like any of the other older kids or teenagers, I don't know. Which they are supposed to be like the older ones are high school students during season one or two, right? I think so. So lore wise, they are under 20s or something. Well, regardless, you earn the right to tell your story. And you can find more arguments, I don't know if in favor, but like to prove this point. There are a couple of series that I can think about from the top of my head. One of them is Alien Earth, and the other one is The Sandman. The Sandman being straight up a Netflix series whose first season did great. Like it was no Stranger Things, but it did great. And imagine all of the things that happened between Sandman season one and season two, and tell me it was a series that it wasn't in control of the people that created it. all of the things that happened for the Sandman before its renewal, before its controversies with fucking Neil Gaiman, everything else has nothing to do with the series. It has a high production value. It has the flexibility of the story because the Sandman, the comic book, it's made out of loose stories, so you can keep telling stories of Dream for eternity. You know, but it didn't earn its independency. And another example, this time not from Netflix, but from FX, now Hulu, is Alien Earth. It also did quite well for the first season, even though as I mentioned during my whole episode, it wasn't the best ending or anything. It literally did not earn its right to write its own history. It was like floating around in who knows what. We didn't know if they were going to renew it. We didn't know anything. And you can see the patterns. You can see the patterns between seasons of this series. Probably if you ask Noah Hawley, the showrunner of Alien Earth, he's probably, yeah, I have ideas and like I know this. Or like it's all ambiguity. It's all ambiguity. It has to be. It has to be because you don't know. You don't know if you're gonna get another season. You don't know if you're gonna get the same actors. So this formula, this streaming show formula, which by now it has become standard. We gotta say it's the standard. Of course, it has its ups and downs, its positive and negatives. But I think what I want to do with Stranger Things is to make a positive spin on it. It is the easiest to be negative about it. And of course, it feels more negative than positive, especially when it happens with a series that you like. And I quoted and I mentioned Alien Earth season 2 precisely for that. That ending that is clearly this, as I said before, this soft clay of an idea. What made it so Stranger Things had its own power to end up on its own ideas and its own volition or just ending at all. And I think it was this transition towards a phenomena. Ironically, it's something that they use a little bit on the series. Like to me, this series, when they become a phenomena, they become self-sustained. Like like a perfect atomic fusion or something, like a battery of perpetual energy. Like now, when they're talking about so much shit about Stranger Things, nobody even bats an eye, and you see how even if you dislike it or not, they already trained you. They like your mind is already shaped to these streaming narrative type of stories, where best case scenario, you are so deep into it that you're gonna buy absolutely anything they sell you with the brand. In the worst case scenario, or the worst case scenario is you don't see it. But like to me, the worst case scenario is like you find it, it's okay, you know. And you can see in like you can throw a stone and you're gonna hit a person of each one of these sides. Like some random kid with like a Hellfire Club T-shirt, like yeah, or someone's like like the concept of front pagers. People that go into the front page of Netflix and they just click on whatever is the thing that is featured on the front page of Netflix. I guess the best thing about Stranger Things is being this case study or this example of a truly enjoyable series that thrives, was created, it survived and thrived under this new reality of storytelling. Because whether we like it or not, this is storytelling. You can't just like brush it off like if it was no, this is just business. You can, this is our storytelling. I mean, of course, there's still independent movies and theater. There are plenty of them. But this is the big mainstream. And Stranger Things, now that it ended in season five, I think we've many of us have just overlooked it. I know I did. As I said, I wasn't like, oh, like I want to know what's next, or like I was so passionate about these kids or the story. To someone like me, I couldn't get that invested into it. You know, to me, things that work like that with these sort of always open-ended sort of stories are like comic book. Like you know, like the volume of Spider-Man ends. You know, another one is coming up. You know, these things are never gonna end. But even in that case, story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can do like parallels with live action until certain extent, but in the case of a series of or live action, like you can't stay invested. And this is a time frame sort of issue, right? Right. Okay. I know Stranger Things season four is ending, and I know five is coming, but I'm not gonna stay invested in this story for years to come. It's not that good of a story. See my point? Like continuing the parallel with comics. In comics, okay, I didn't like this current volume. I didn't like this current creative team. You know, when this ends, if it's a big character like Spider-Man, you know the big one is coming right up in a month or so, maybe 2 months. You see? So this thing that's so big, Stranger Things, its format, its narrative sort of style became so big that our brains are already adapted to it. Whether we like it or not, part of us have already accepted this reality. And as I said, I don't want to look at this negatively. So that's why I'm thinking Stranger Things. I'm taking all of these questionable things, these open-ended narratives, these, as I said, these anchor points or these minimum commune denominators to create a good streaming series or a series at all, like a episodic series, you can call it, and say this format is not bad, and say what Stranger Things accomplished was to show that this format allows for great things to happen. Because ultimately, as I said at the beginning, I couldn't remember stories or characters or anything. I couldn't remember details of what I loved about the series when I loved it. What I could remember were emotions. What I could remember were sensations of sadness, of um, anger, or like, I don't know, feeling thrilled. What is the sensation of like a thriller like it creates a thrilling sensation? But anyways, I couldn't remember shit about it, but how I felt. So to me, that I wasn't on the go crazy for the series and be a complete crazy as fanatic of it, like wearing my Hellfire shirt and listening to the 80s music just because, or Metallica, God forbid. Me not being that case, I still, the moment season 5 began, that same day I was watching it. I was watching that same day. Not because I wanted to know what happened with the characters, because I wanted to feel that familiarity. You know, this of course could be something deeply personal, and it's just me and my emotions. Which, by the way, season 5, as a season on its own, it still had all of the weaknesses of the previous seasons. The weird plot, the I've been saying soft clay this whole episode, but that's a good metaphor. The soft clay nature of the narrative and the story, uh, you know. But it has, as I said, the anchors. It has the characters, it has the production values, and it has the tone. And in that sense, the part of the tone, it has some hard-hitting moments. And as I said, this series earned its way to end how it did, and it also earned the right to write and do some of the character moments in season 5, which they are not like brilliantly written or anything. They're not like stroke of geniuses. They are just people sort of squeezing out of the thing they built, squeezing all of the emotions, and it works perfectly. So even if you still feel a little iffy or like not completely sold on all of these elements of streaming series that I've been talking this whole episode that can create a not so friendly environment to you as a viewer. You're always like raising an eyebrow, like, yeah, this feel weird. When those moments happen, where they squeeze the emotion that they have built from a seedling they planted 10 years ago, you will feel them. If you were like the tiny bit invested in it, you're gonna feel them. And they knew them. And that's why Stranger Things was a great series under this new world of streaming writing and storytelling, you know? But anyways, I try to focus a little bit more on the series, but it's hard. It's hard. Want me to talk about the crappy monsters or like the 80s themes or like I don't know the questionable action. Nah, nah. It's all about planting the seeds of something that, like like these vines, that you can lead them certain ways, but what you call the central stem on the trunk, or the tree trunk can be rigid. It can be rigid. It can. And if you manage to find that balance, you can create incredible dramatic moments that I was gonna say they will last forever. But I think in a couple of years I'm gonna forget most of what I of the details of season 5. I know one moment that I will not forget. My favorite moment of season 5 and my favorite character. I'm not gonna say who. But I know that moment I won't forget. But anyways, to everybody that enjoyed Stranger Things, I feel you. All of those who hated Stranger Things, I feel you as well, but I warn you, this is the new standard. And for those of us who were just mad about it, hey, enjoy it anyways. I guarantee that you will gonna find something to enjoy in season 5. And before that, of course, that's why you're watching season 5, right? and that's my time. Another episode, the upside, whatever. Like go listen to what's Kate Bush. Like man, I'm always so done with the 80s for some reason. I still accept it. Like they do something with 80s aesthetic, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. And like I watch it, and I'm like, man, I'm so sick of the 80s. But they remain cool, so you end up like, man, the 80s were cool. The bipolar emotional roller coaster that are the 80s, who undoubtedly are gonna come back. I hope they don't do like Stranger Things in the 90s or during the 90s. Like, you know, that failed experiment called the 90s show. I really hope they don't do that. I really hope they don't do that. But we'll see. And if they do that, we'll see each other again talking about it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for another. Man, it's just starting. I was going to thank for the review, but thank you for listening to me in this new year. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye and keep enjoying. Man, that was some crappy tagline.